quorum, let's roll.
Can't wait for him.
Oh, he said, yep,
Can't
ready,
wait,
set.
can't wait for the boss to give me a go-ahead.
Tony, are you giving an okay to go?
As soon as you guys are ready, as soon as Jerry gives the go-ahead.
Okay, we have a call to order for the Bartlett Economic Development Commission meeting of October. May we have a roll call, Tony?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Cabasco. And I'm just going to mention quickly before I do the roll, one of our commissioners for the past 5 years is now one of the trustees on the village board. So Joe Laporte, that's the reason he's not here tonight. And so we'll probably fill that spot with somebody else pretty soon. So I want to thank the 5 of you for coming tonight. Jerry Cabasco.
Here.
Kirsten Erickson.
Here.
Robert Perry.
Here.
Tracy Smandilla is not here. I'll answer here. Adam Lewinsky is present. Nanette Gutenkopf. Michelle Hughes, not here. And Robert Gorski.
Here.
Okay, thanks again. We have a quorum tonight.
Okay, next agenda item would be approval of the previous meeting minutes from August 8th, 2022. Do we have any comments or remarks or any motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Did you second that, Kirsten?
Yeah, she said.
Amanda?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Anybody or any of our guests in the audience are free to make a comment at this time. If you care to say anything, you can go up to the podium, introduce yourself, and tell us what you want. Looks like everybody's passing on that, so.
I have a quick public comment. Last weekend in the village of Bartlett, we had Oktoberfest, and two ladies up there, Nan and Kirsten, were on the committee, and they worked really, really hard. They probably put in, hundreds of hours of time and mental anguish and physical labor, and the event went off perfectly. Maybe not in their eyes, but in the community's eyes. So a big thank you to our ladies at the chamber for highlighting the businesses and the community and really putting on a wonderful event. So thank you to those two ladies.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing it up, Scott. I was going to bring it up later on in the ending of the meeting, but this couldn't have happened without, obviously, the Bartlett Chamber, without the Bartlett Rotary and the Bartlett Lions, and especially without the village helping us and supporting us. Oktoberfest was a huge, huge success, and we will gather back around the table in a few weeks and see who's going to suck it up again and be there. But we couldn't say thank you enough, so that's why Nan and I brought the silly hats to say thank you. And I mean, you guys were there. We had so much village help. It was, thank you. So, appreciate it.
I think we're all appreciative of your hard work and efforts. So
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Sorry I couldn't be there.
Next year, you're in town.
Got to be on a different date probably, because I was out in Iowa,
September 23rd.
out at their Oktoberfest.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, we have a BEDA application from Pastamia. Tony, you want to lead us through that?
I'd love to. I feel like some of our businesses here tonight really don't need an introduction. Pasta Mia epitomizes successful downtown eating and drinking establishment. It's been, one could say it's been a stalwart and an anchor within streets of Bartlett. Previously, of course, Bartlett Plaza It's probably the restaurant also. We've all patronized it many times, and I had many discussions with the owner here, Peter Caruso, in what I term is the many lean years. Those of you who've been in the village for a while, I'm sure recall well the nearly 10 years of vacancy of the former grocery store space. You remember the nearly 8 years between the operators of the Ace Hardware store. And along with that, besides those two very large vacancies that existed for quite a few years, of course, there were lots of scattered vacancies throughout. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing about the redevelopment of the center over the past 2 years. We've all witnessed that and worked with Mr. Rafidia. But my point being is that one constant in that center pretty much the whole time has been Pasta Mia. So in terms of what it means to the village and the downtown and that center, it's one of those businesses that you count on being there. In terms of the BEDA application, in going along with what we're trying to accomplish in the village, making it a more lively, interactive, friendly type of atmosphere and an inviting atmosphere, Mr. Caruso approached us a few months ago about doing an improvement to the windows in the front of his building, the windows and doors. As I wrote in the memo, it's typically a large part of a customer's first impression of an establishment. It plays a big part in setting the tone of a visit, whether it's clean, inviting, whether you can see inside a business, whether it's well lit. Again, I'm sure you're all well aware of what an improvement like this, how it can improve the appearance and really the functionality of a business. So at the basis of this, it's replacing the existing windows with sliding glass windows. There's only one quote in terms of a contractor to do this job. It's from A&S Glass Company. If you give me a minute on my paper, I'm going to flip over to it. A&S Glass Company out of Oak Lawn, who would remove the existing storefront windows and reinstall the top section with arch windows, and to provide 3 openings, bifold doors, 6 panels, 3 on each side, for a quote for $36,000. Due to a lot of the reasons that I presented in terms of the longevity of the business and the obvious dedication of its operator, we're recommending a 50% BEDA grant on this one. I also want to add that in the many years prior of the Village of Bartlett having a downtown TIF and various types of incentive programs, this is the first time Mr. Caruso's come in for one on his own, specifically for Pasta Mia. I do have to preface that with saying the previous longtime owners of the center, the Gorskys, came in a number of times for TIF rebates when we had that program that ended in 2010. And of course, Mr. Rafidia has come in twice for BEDA grants when he acquired the center. So without further ado, it's a pretty straightforward application, and Mr. Caruso's here to address any questions you have of him.
My main question is, looking at all 3 of these as a whole, it's $110,000. How much is that? How much do we have left this year? How much do you see rolling in, that sort of thing?
Yes, it is a budgeted. We do have enough in the budget. We budget $250,000 every year. We're well below that, although these would bring us up along with the one for Rebecca's Bakery, that the payment is pending on that one. We had a few, if you recall, real small BEDA grants, like $1,500, $2,000 for a couple of new signs. And then the petitioner, the next petitioner, who earlier in the year was approved for 50,000. These will all take us up close to around 200,000. And the second part of your question, there is another $50,000 applicant kind of waiting in the wings in the next couple of months. So it'll be likely that this will be the fiscal year where we allocate the most grants. It is possible, I suppose, that we would come up to that $250,000 threshold. But I've mentioned this in some previous meetings. Because of the timing of when various projects are done, whatever the date of the check is that we hand or give to a business for a BEDA, that's the fiscal year that it comes out of. So it's quite possible that there might be others that actually go even past May. But the ones we're working on now, tonight, we anticipate those to be paid out this fiscal year. So to answer your question, we're going to be around 200,000 in terms of how much would be approved if these get approved.
And Tony, this is our biggest year yet for grants, correct? We have not even come close to this in previous years.
That's true, that's
There we go.
true. We've had some $50,000 grants, and one year we had two of them. There was I don't have it all in front of me, but about a little over 2 years ago, there was a $50,000 grant to Mr. Ophidia, which was Phase 2, right around the same time that 120 Live, I think, was opening. But that year, we didn't really have any of those smaller ones. Rebecca's first BEDA grant was only $7,000. So I think the most we've ever allocated in one fiscal year has been around 100,000. We've never allocated all of it yet. I mean, it's kind of a minor point, but we do consider it somewhat of a first come, first serve. So the other, I'm not going to talk about the other big one coming up, but there is another one in the works of pretty large scope for an existing business.
So simply put, these recommendations you have would not affect us hitting our cap, in your opinion?
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I was asking.
I think if it came to that, Scott and I, when we were meeting with somebody, we'd have to, alert them that there was some limitation on how much is left, and we would do our best to work with them anyway. We've never exceeded any of our line items. If it came to that, we might, look at a way to shift something or however we could help.
I have a question with relate to the project anticipated cost and then the actual ask. Is there some ineligible costs, or did this project just come in better than expected?
Well, I think I would defer that one to Mr. Caruso. If you're referring to the fact that he wrote 40,000 down on project costs, but the quote came in at 36, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, I just based it rather than the project cost that he wrote on the application. I based it upon the proposal in hand. But, he's here. He can address that. Would you like to come up and? So the quote was for 36? Yeah.
So the quote came in at 36,000. The extra 4 was for brickwork inside. When they get done doing the windows, there's going to be naturally some kind of brickwork, painting on the bricks, whatever it is. So I figured another 3,000 to 4,000 for that.
Okay.
I only had one. Well, I had another quote from another guy. He was a little bit higher. The reason why they're so high is because of the arches and the span of the window. Sure. If you saw the windows, they're really large. They have to put headers across the top.
Okay.
That's why they're coming in so high.
Yeah. No, I know that sometimes these applications come with ineligible costs, and so I was trying to make sure I understood the distinction.
Right.
Yeah.
Pete, can I ask a question on the quoted prices are available for 30 days from the generated date? What was the date of this proposal? Because I'm thinking it was past 30 days because you were supposed to be at our last meeting, I believe, that ended up being canceled?
Correct. So the date, I think the date is on the quote, isn't it?
Yeah, it's August 24th.
Right.
Okay. So has the price gone up since August 24th, or are you still?
I don't believe so. I haven't asked them, but I doubt.
You don't ask.
Yeah,
That's what I was just wondering. I'm like, did the
hope
price
not.
go up yet?
right.
Okay, thank you.
There are no other questions from the commissioners. We can entertain a motion to approve the BEDA grant for Pasta Mia.
I'd like to motion that we approve the BEDA grant in the amount of $18,000 for Pasta Mia.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Pasta Mia BEDA grant is approved. Next BEDA application is from Banbury Fair.
Yes, I'll go into a little more detail on this one, but again, much like Pasta Mia, this is a business that doesn't really need introduction. This particular BEDA grant, if you recall, the Sufferns were standing here before you, I think, in January, and then the village board in February. And at that point, they were spending, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was in excess of $250,000. And just to clarify, that was primarily, if you recall, for the infrastructure, including water and sewer, going to the property. And the address for that BEDA grant was their longtime business that you all know and love, 211 West Railroad. And also it included quite a bit of expenses for basically an annex that they were building in order to support the conversion of this property to be able to support a future restaurant. So we call this one the Banbury Barn BEDA grant. This is a new address, a separate PIN and a separate address, 215 West Railroad Avenue. This barn goes back over 100 years old, 1902. It's being renovated to convert it to a food and beverage business. This conversion requires extensive interior renovation, including electrical and plumbing, new windows and doors, of course, fire suppression system, parking lot repairs, HVAC, a deck, and equipment supporting the food and beverage uses. I've explained already how they came in for a previous BEDA grant for the infrastructure and for the new structure. So the village board approved that BEDA grant back at the March 1st meeting, and there is the number. That was based on $242,000 worth of improvements made. At that time, we explained that this was going to be a two-phase project and thus two BEDA grants. In terms of this particular application, and again, astute observers will notice that they had written down a larger amount than what it is that we're looking at in terms of eligible for this particular application. They submitted estimates, and I want to point out to the EDC, because I know there's a lot of pages and a lot of estimates attached to their application. I have additional estimates in my possession that does bring the grand total up to that $154,000. So what we did on this one was, in terms of the BEDA grants, we do our best as a staff and a village, an EDC and a board to make sure that we're doing BEDA grants for what we would term permanent improvements, or improvements that could service, future businesses as well. And so what we did on this one was we filtered out some of the costs that were more specific to the tenant improvements. So out of the $154,000, we determined that about $82,000 worth of the costs are being paid by the landlords, sitting right there, Bruce and Jan Suffern, with the remainder being paid by their tenant. In terms of the estimated costs, big one, they were kind enough also, you see, after my staff memo to detail, kind of break out the different costs. But the second page, you will see $51,000, nice big round number of that going to their general contractor, Mark Leffler. And if you've had a chance to take a peek or to look at the work that's being done, it's absolutely amazing. Scott and I went and looked at it last week, and it's amazing what you can do with a 140-year-old barn. So as I said, we filtered out some of the costs. The $82,000, which we are attributing to the Sufferns, the vast majority of that is what you can see, some of the costs that Mark Loeffler's doing in terms of, air conditioning and a new ramp and plumbing improvements, asphalt parking lots and all that. We've included some of his architectural renderings. That's not really required for BEDA, but we thought, that would be a nice thing to include. And then when you go through the rest of it, you see large expenditures for electrical type of work, fire panel, and I probably attached 20-plus pages of quotes for various windows and doors for this. The long story short is this is a big project, and out of the $154,000, we attributed a little more than 50% of that. Those costs are being paid by the Sufferns. So we are recommending to do a BEDA grant at a 50% rate based upon their expenditures. So we're recommending an amount of $41,000. And as I mentioned a few times, the Sufferns are sitting here to answer any questions you have about their project that we can't.
I have a question. It's a lot of work. You guys got a lot of patience. When do you think this is all going to be done?
We had a meeting today, and so the tile is being installed in the bathrooms today. The tile is then going to be installed in the kitchen extension shortly thereafter. So by the end of next week, we're hopeful that all the kitchen equipment and sinks and dishwashers and various other things will all be installed shortly thereafter. So my general, Mark Loeffler, is looking to somewhat sign off at the end of next week. So thereafter, it's going to be a matter of final inspections, occupancy permits, and then Rakesh is getting the liquor license and various other licenses required, but that all requires an occupancy permit, to my understanding.
When would you like to see it open?
I'd like to see it open
December,
tomorrow.
January?
Last week.
Of course, of course.
We haven't collected any rent on the barn year for almost the beginning of the pandemic, when we let the people that were renting the barn out of their lease because of the pandemic. We let 3 renters out of their leases because of the pandemic. And so we've basically restructured our business, and this is a pivotal piece. And I was mentioning on the way in that I do want to thank you for the first grant, because without that, wouldn't happen. And so realize that how important these are for people who are small businesses that need every dollar you can generate that you can get to do something like this. I do think you're going to be very proud of it, though.
Well, we look at it as a partnership between the private sector and the village, and we think that it should be a viable business, and We feel that you've been in business in Bartlett for a very long time. You're not going anywhere. So we wish you luck, and we wish you
Thank you.
opening as soon as possible.
Thank you, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, can I just ask a question? Why on the paperwork, we see so many different names? We see La Pitte, we see your name on there, we see Delicious Crepes, we see Banbury Fair. So I'm just wondering, when I'm looking at all the different quotes, who these are actually funneling through.
Sure. Because we started the project a year and a half ago, more than a year and a half ago, things got invoiced differently. And bank accounts got drained at different points in the course of this whole thing. And so some of the invoices were paid initially by Rakesh, and then thereafter, regardless if it was invoiced to Le Petit or to us personally, we paid for them. He's going to be biting off a big piece now when we get operational. Good.
With regard to the vendor selection, so there's a variety of different vendors and their quotes, et cetera.
Sure.
Is that something that your general contractor decided who the vendors are going to be, or did you have a role in that?
Well, he reviewed that with me.
Okay.
You know, I highly recommend Mark, by the way, but, yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty frugal guy, and so I wanted to know where my money was going and how it was being spent, and so he reviewed all that with me, and the advantages and disadvantages of those different quotes.
That's exactly what I was going for with the question. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So who will actually own the business once it opens?
You know, our goal, to be honest with you, is to rent space. And so he's owning the business. We own the property. We own the complex, you might say, of the business that he is putting in there, which we've done for many, many years. We've had many, many people come in and rent from us, and we've improved the property. However, we had for the ice cream shop, you recall the ice cream shop? Various others. We had a wool shop and a bead shop and different shops. So we would prefer not to work for the rest of our lives if we didn't have to, as opposed to rent out space, rent out pieces of Banbury Fair, and this is part of that.
So will it be Rakesh that actually will be owning and operating the business?
Oh, yeah, not me,
Right.
yeah, yes. And we have a long-term lease with him, secured lease with him, and have gone over insurance and all the other protocols that are required to have a business in the barn like that.
Thank you, Mr. Suffer.
Just another general question here. Just to be clear, this BEDA grant is going to them, right, as the landlords? Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just still confused on looking at all the different names on it, because they're all in March of 2021. So that's my only thing. I think that that's a good clarifying point, is it going to the Suffrans, or is it going to?
The money, the application and the memo indicates the money's going to the Suffrans. The Suffrans will get the money.
Okay, as the property owners, regardless of all the different names on each of these, because, I mean, you flip the pages and the names just keep changing.
Like Mr. Suffren said, it was a 2-year project. This is actually when,
These are all March of 2021.
right, yeah, it's a long project. When tenants or landlords do a build-out of that nature, that's not uncommon in many of our complexes where certain things are purchased by different LLC. I mean, you're talking $300,000, $400,000. Different folks made different purchases. But we have all the paperwork here, and if anybody wants to review that, we're happy to share it.
Yeah, I think we just wanted to be clear after seeing all the different names that it was actually, going to the Suffrans as the people who actually own the property and not to another entity that keeps having different names there. So that was my only point. I'm good with it.
Well, again, if there's no further discussion on the issue, we can entertain a motion from one of the commissioners.
I'll motion that we approve the $41,000 to Banbury Fair for the BEDA grant.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
I was in it a couple weeks ago, and it's amazing. It's really turning out nice. It's, I guess the last time I was in there, it was the Kim Redmond, and it was so different. It's amazing. Done.
Be a nice addition.
Yeah.
And from a staff perspective, I mean, we're so excited about this grant because Bruce and his wife Jan have been on that corner in downtown Bartlett for over 30, how many years? 39 years on the same corner in downtown Bartlett. I mean, that's astonishing, and they continue to reinvent themselves year after year in recessions and pandemics. So I think you folks should be really proud that this program is going to people like Bruce and Jan, because they really embody the village and the downtown, and we're very proud of them, and we hope that when the facility opens in the near few weeks, I think everybody will be really proud. So I just wanted to add that comment.
Next agenda item would be Moore Brewery, BEDA application.
Yes, thank you, Jerry. Well, again, another project that you've all talked about for many months, maybe possibly years here at the EDC, wondering when it was going to proceed. And here we are in late 2022. Something else I was going to add to the Suffern's project is kind of like a whole little redevelopment area in that stretch of Railroad Avenue. So in terms of Moore Brewing, this is one of the bigger projects in our downtown, obviously. And, it was a long time coming to fruition, much like the Sufferns. Honestly, even maybe a couple of years before we started discussing their project, we started seeing what we could do to attract a microbrewery to our downtown. And we had a lot of different ones that we tried to get to expand into our community, and it finally came to be that it took two Bartlett residents who operate one of the most successful microbreweries and restaurants in the Chicago area to come here and go through their project. In terms of their BEDA application, you see a very extensive application with a very extensive business plan attached. Really, they have like a detailed marketing plan and everything about the village, and they've really done what you would call a lot of due diligence in terms of selecting the site and purchasing it from the village and moving forward with their plans. So the basics of it is have started their construction. This is a 2-story microbrewery with a full restaurant. It's over 17,000 square feet. You can see they're basically building on the entire lot. This will include a brew house with research and development, a tap room, 10,000 square feet of seating between 2 levels with over 160 tap room seats, an extended season room with radiant in-ground heating for an additional 60 seats, As I mentioned, they submitted a highly detailed business plan, and it's not often before you at the EDC, you're going to see a project cost exceeding $4 million for a downtown development. So their estimates that they turned in amount to $4.4 million. But that figure it does include some things that we don't consider BEDA eligible. Professional design fees, $135,000, contingency costs, working capital. We don't consider those BEDA eligible. Even excluding those, the project amounts to at least $3.6 million in construction costs, because this is just like with Pasta Mia or with Banbury Fair, we're in very close communications with them, as you might imagine, through this process, and they're building such a huge building in the middle of downtown. So we won't go into great detail, but just generally share that those costs have increased throughout the course of their project fairly significantly. So we can all sit here and say that they most likely will spend at least $4 million on this project. So
Just a quick note, their management team is at the Colorado Beer Fest doing business, and ownership had to take a sudden trip to India, so they apologize for not being here.
And as you might imagine, with such a significant expenditure, I mean, really comparable to the purchase and redevelopment of Bartlett Plaza and into Streets of Bartlett. So considering this massive investment right in the heart of our downtown, we're glad to recommend a $50,000 BEDA grant, which, as you know, is the maximum amount for this program. And Scott and I will try to, in their absence, we'll do our best to answer any questions you have about the project.
Tony, at what point in the construction going on here does the village usually write a check?
Are you referring to when the BEDA check gets paid?
Yes.
That is after basically final occupancy is approved, usually when they're open for business, when you can walk in there and order food and a drink. The BEDA grant, of course, is something that reimburses. I mean, I suppose it could be before they're open to the public, but really what we're trying to do is verify that all the payments that they proposed in their application have been made. They have to verify it, and we have to ensure that everything is done up to code. So when our village approves something and grants a certificate of occupancy, that's basically passing, I believe, I want to say 5 inspections. They have to pass electrical, structural, plumbing, they have to pass fire, and then a health inspection as well. So there's at least 5 inspectors have to go through there and sign off on it. And so hopefully that answers your question. In practice, usually when we get the check into the hands of the business owner is typically once their doors are open to the public. Because just like the Suffrans just said, who previously, they want to get open as soon as possible. And with this massive expenditure that they have, they can't start making income fast enough for them. They want to be open like yesterday if they can.
What are we looking at for an estimated opening date now? I know originally they had expressed a desire to open in November of this year.
They did. That's not
Looks
going to
like
happen,
we're pushing it
obviously.
pretty far out now.
Well, they're talking about February for now. One thing I can attest to from having done economic development here for 17 years, typically it takes a little longer than people anticipate. But they've had, we could talk probably for hours about different challenges they faced and glitches, if you will, in the construction process. But I think if they were sitting here and answering that question, they would probably tell you February. Is that right,
So,
Scott?
The money that we approved tonight would be held aside until for payment next year then?
Well, it would be after they meet all those codes that I mentioned and get their certificate of occupancy. But if you're referring to the question about the budget and process, and our fiscal year is May 1st through April 30th, so it still would be this same fiscal year when the Sufferns would get their payments, when their two BEDA grants, when Rebecca's and more Brewing. And so if that's your question, those we anticipate out of these three that you have before you tonight, more Brewing will be the last one that gets finished.
Makes sense.
So I guess that answers my question. Basically, the way this works, money that's approved in this fiscal year doesn't necessarily have to be dispersed
Right.
in the same fiscal year.
That's correct, but again, I'm going to remind you the fiscal year is May 1st. This really should be open to the public with their BEDA check deposited in their business account before May 1st. So it will be this fiscal year.
It's not like money that's not dispersed within this fiscal year has to go back into some fund or anything.
No. No, if we have a year where there's not even one BEDA grant, then it's just 250,000 goes away, and then, we budget it for the next year, And that's, this wasn't necessarily one of your questions, but just thinking about it here, if we allocate all the 250,000, or let's say we go slightly over, we start our budget process fairly soon. And the village board's been very supportive of the BEDA grant. That's just how much we've budgeted so far. I suppose we could ask for more if we see fit.
The number that came from was when the board wanted to earmark video gaming money, and that's where that 250 came from. The village is making a lot more revenue than that, close to 350, that Joey just pointed out. So that was the reasoning behind that dollar figure when we started the program, was video gaming money earmarked to go back to the business community.
The money, any earmarked money is just held aside, and it has no relevance to next year's BEDA budget.
That's right. That's right, yeah. If we could roll over, it's actually another village line item. It's not like a TIF fund that remains static and continues to grow over the years. This is like literally a line item in the village's budget, in the economic development budget.
And again, this has been our most robust year. We haven't had this many come forward. We haven't been able to help this many businesses in the past, so this is a bigger year, so.
It is, and just
It's about time.
Just generally, when Scott and I talk about more Brewing, let's just use this for an example. We started meeting with them nearly 4 years ago, maybe over 4 years ago. So there's meetings that we have this week of people talking about doing future projects where it might take a year and a half or more before you see them coming in before you. So these don't. We keep that in our mind as we administer not just the BEDA program, but all our incentives and budgets. So that's the nature of development. Some projects take a few months, and it's a simple build out of a small space. Pete could probably have those sliding glass doors done in a couple of days, but something like more Brewing might take a year to build. While the prices of labor and materials escalate every month.
Tony, can you speak to why on the application we see void on a lot of the pages and a lot of the different sections? What does that entail?
Yeah, I asked them that. They just wanted to make sure nobody misconstrued anything we include in any of our packets as an actual contract.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Probably a pretty smart thing for.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I was just
Yeah.
looking at it, and I was like, oh. And yeah, I kind of thought of that when I was looking at some of these applications. I'm like, we need to black out a little bit more information.
Yeah, we do black out a lot. We
Yeah.
look to black out their personal cell phones
Yep,
and
that makes perfect
personal
sense.
emails most of the time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I know you said that we could talk for hours about some of their challenges, but driving by there, you can tell that the construction has been little to none. Can you just kind of give me a sense of, or give us a sense of what the overriding issues are for the slowness of the construction?
I think they've had a couple of challenges, even some challenges as basic as a labor stoppage
Okay,
for a number of weeks.
okay.
I know that was one of them. I believe, again, Scott might have more details, but I think it was with some of the concrete contractors stopped work on the job for a while.
And then when your contractors are all lined up, when one falls through, it creates a domino effect of others. So they've had their challenges, but we actually met with them last week. We met with our building inspectors and ownership and their architect, and they're getting back on track. Last week there was probably 8 to 10 people on the site for 3 or 4 days, but they're pretty excited because they're going to get it closed up before the winter time, and that was our concern. So they're getting back on track. I think they have maybe 2 outstanding permits that they need to finish as of this morning, and I anticipate those being turned in tomorrow based on our conversations with them. So once they start up again, I think it's going to be pretty quick. Yeah.
Tony, based on the success of the BEDA program, is the village going to consider doing more of this type?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, there were years between when we had, and I should preface this, even though we see mostly downtown projects, it's a village-wide program. But in practice, most of these BEDA grants have been allocated towards kind of small mom and pop businesses building up our downtown, specifically because there's older structures like the barn at Banbury Fair, and you saw how a few years ago the Bowman family bought that old office and they converted it to a beautiful restaurant, and those are great examples. So I guess to answer your question, yeah, we see more of these. There's more properties to be developed. And the one I alluded to that could be another 50,000, I don't want to talk about it yet because it may or may not happen in the next couple of months. That's far from the downtown area. So we do work closely. Keep in mind, I don't have a day here where I don't speak with businesses or brokers or investors, not even one. And I mean, I helped create the BEDA program. So if we see something that looks like it could qualify, usually, you know, I think even last week, I mentioned the BEDA program to a small store that was looking to go into Main Street Plaza a few doors down. You know, it's something when somebody's on the fence, you know, a mom and pop business that might be putting everything they have into some kind of business venture. And I mean, of course, there's always going to be risk involved. But, you know, it's something that, number one, every business owner that I meet with basically asks if we have any type of grant or incentive program. So anyhow, when we see it as an opportunity to make one of these grants, we're putting it out in front of them. So in a word, yes, you're going to keep seeing them. But I guess eventually a lot of the downtown businesses will buildings will probably be refurbished, but there's plenty to go.
Tony, given the rapid rate of inflation, are we likely to see an increased BEDA budget proposal for the next go-around?
You know, this is probably the first night we've considered that. If we allocate all 250,000, I'm going to consider that a great success. If we have some grant that's going to take 5 or 10,000 over budget to make something happen, we're going to find a way to make it happen. So if that's a consideration, then that's, I mean, inflation is real. We see some projects we've been working on that are struggling to move forward because of it, or maybe not moving forward. So that's something I think during the budget process we'll at least consider.
I was referring more to the total overall
Right. You're saying to like
budget, not
300,000?
specifically to any individual grant.
Yeah, it's something we should consider. I mean, again, we didn't have any program like this until about maybe 4 years ago. So I think we've been doing pretty well leveraging, you know, a maximum 50,000, you know, to some of these projects, you know, range $500,000 or millions of dollars. So.
I mean, looking at that and seeing the numbers just keep adding up, just like on Bruce and Jan's.
Yeah.
I mean, you just see the numbers keep adding and adding and adding up. It's a significant, significant investment, so.
Yeah, I mean, for something as big as Moore, that amount probably doesn't put the project over the top, but it helps in their overall budgeting and borrowing process. And like the Suffern said, some of these projects wouldn't move forward. A lot of them wouldn't move forward without it.
For sure.
Any more discussion on the topic?
I motion that we approve the $50,000 BEDA grant for Moore Brewer.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll forward that
The
to,
grant for Moore Brewery is approved.
that's right.
Tony, what about new business? Next agenda item.
Well, I think Scott hit the main thing. About Oktoberfest was a great success, and looks like he's ready to comment on that.
The branding exercise, you'll recall that we did a while back that we pumped the brakes on for a little bit, for two reasons. One, budgetary reasons, to make sure that our ducks were in a row for the budget cycle. And two, we wanted to see some of these projects start popping up, so that way those would be taken in with our branding efforts. So that RFP is probably going out next week, maybe, sometime next week. So that's also pretty exciting, and you folks had a lot of good thoughts that were incorporated into that.
How is it going with the business surveys and the surveys of the community at large?
For the business surveys, we're at about, I think, over 10% responding right now. We have another month to go, close to Thanksgiving, on the business surveys. For resident surveys, we've got over 800 to 900 respondents. So that's about, I don't want to do the math real quick. I know I did it, but I believe 20 to 30% of households specifically. So we're feeling pretty good about that. And right now we're going to do a last push because the resident surveys end on Friday.
And one nice thing about those surveys is the only cost has really been Joey's time. 5, 6 years ago, we would have had to go out for another RFP and spend a lot of money, but our technology has gotten to the level where we've been able to do it in-house. So we're pretty excited about that.
Tony, the property on Lake Street with Hyundai going in there, is that proceeding? Are they going to start digging anytime soon?
Yeah, they're lining up their permits as well. We had a meeting with the Director of Planning and Development last week, and mentioned that they're very close to obtaining whatever permits, building permits that they need to acquire. They have their own, beyond the village's timeline, they have timelines that they need to meet in terms of their franchise agreement. So that's another one that, they're looking to move forward as soon as possible. It's my understanding they want to break ground by the end of the year, so that's coming up pretty soon.
Anything new with the residential development?
Yeah, they were,
Close by to Hyundai?
you're referring to West Bartlett and Route 59? Yeah, they were before the village board last week for their town. It's a multi-phase project. I'm not too involved with the residential aspect of it, but they were here last week presenting their townhome phase. And as a matter of fact, one of the things they presented to the village board was developing the townhomes as a rental townhome community, which is something that hasn't really existed in this area previously, but it's becoming somewhat of a trend nationally, specifically in the southern states. So that was something that they mentioned as a possibility. And I think one of the other things they were here for last week was passing some type of, ordinance to ensure the proper maintenance of it, in case there isn't a homeowners association. So, they were here as recently as last week, sitting where the Sufferns are sitting before the board last Tuesday night, seeking approval for their townhome phase. I don't recall if it was approved or if it was up for final vote. But yeah, they're interested in proceeding. It's D.R. Horton.
And you were talking about like a senior apartment building going up in that area. Developers were
The
going
last
back and
meeting
forth
when
for
I
the last
talked
3
about
years.
that, I'm not going to declare anything too specific, but that project is, let's say, stalling. If you're talking about the west side of Route 59, between Schick and Army Trail, is definitely facing some major hurdles. If you're referring to the D.R. Horton project at 59 in West Bartlett, they do have an age-targeted portion of their development. So that will be moving forward.
Tony, can I make a recommendation that you go back to the staff in the village and talk about obviously reappointing somebody in Joe Laporte's position, but also revisiting the attendance requirements? It's very hard to make quota or quorum, and I feel that we need to address attendance and who's actually here as commissioners and ensure that you're not scrambling every Monday to ensure that when we have an agenda that we have enough people to vote on these items. So I really think that needs to be looked at.
Thank you, yes, we'll definitely take a look.
Thank you. And it'll be hard to fill Joe's spot because Joe was great. So, he
Yeah.
was always here. He always contributed and had a lot to say. So, first off, we have a big gap that we need to fill with his shoes, so.
Right. There's a few applications in,
Oh, good. That's good news.
yeah.
Because some of us want to leave.
Well, if there's no more new business to discuss, we can entertain adjournment.
Motion
Anybody
to
up
adjourn.
for it?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.